Good morning and welcome back to the studio. First thing I'm going to say is next week there's going to be no video made, so I won't be sending one out on the Tuesday the 14th of April. The following one will be the 21st of April, so I'll see you then. We have been working incredibly hard this last few weeks. It's been very challenging for quite a lot of you, the objective analytical drawing exercises that we've done. So extremely well done if you've had a go at those. If you haven't, it doesn't matter. Just spending a little time watching the videos, and even just when you sit and look, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to draw, just sit and look. Not a bad thing to do. But I thought you all deserved a bit of fun, a bit of relaxation, a bit of a change. We'll use some colour today. And I've got some books to share with you first of all. There's some artists I've been looking at, and I'll show you the books. I've got 4 books. I'll just show you the pictures and tell you who the artists are, and then I would suggest that you go and find them and look them up on the internet and see what you think. Let me know. Some of my favourite artists coming up. Here's Paul Klee, and his work is quite abstract, quite playful, quite accessible, I think. Nothing difficult to understand here. And I've just marked a few pages. Yeah, it's a beautiful sort of, I feel it's a landscape-based abstract. Quite soft colours. It was painted in 1929. It's called Highway and Byways. Could almost be a patchwork quilt. And on the opposite page there's a small reproduction of this painting called the Temple District of Perth, made with ink and watercolour. Really, really pretty. Really easy to look at. Paul Klee. In this book, my Museum of Modern Art Highlights book, I've marked a page where you'll find, okay, here we go, and there is Sonia Delaunay-Turk, whose work you can see, an example of her work here, where she has created a composition alongside a poem, and her composition in colours and shapes reacts and responds to the words of the poem. Sonia Delaunay-Turk. There, you can see the name if you want to make any notes. And on the following page there's an example of a piece of work by her husband, Robert Delaunay. Robert Delaunay, French artist. He was born in 1885 and died in 1941. A lot of his interest was around colour theory, and his particular inspiration came from the colour theory developed by another Frenchman, Michel-Eugène Chevreul. It says in my book here, absorbing Chevreul's scientific analyses, Delaunay has here gone beyond them into a mystical belief in colour, its fusion into unity, symbolising the possibility for harmony in the chaos of the modern world. Appropriate for our times. But what simple pleasure I obtain anyway just from this painting. It suggests to me the sun and a rainbow and all the colours of the prism. And talking of prisms, an artist called Winifred Nicholson. Her work is really quite interesting. She actually used to look through a prism and then try and paint what she saw. And here's just a quick example. I'll find the page I marked. Here we go. That's a painting called Hover, painted in the late 1970s. I've got a prism in my window in the studio, and I very often find little flashes of rainbow colours just playing over surfaces in the studio. There's one in the kitchen in my house as well, both of which face south, catch the sunshine beautifully. So Winifred Nicholson, another name for you to look up. And then finally, in my British watercolours book, there's a painting which you might be familiar with. Bear with me while I just find the page. There we are. There it is. Constable. Constable's painting of Stonehenge, with an interesting sky, a very dark and stormy sky, and he's just wiped out these shapes of a double rainbow. No colour in them really. I wonder if the colour has faded or whether he didn't put any colour in them. I find that quite strange, that there's a colourless rainbow there. I wonder what's happened. But I really love this quote here on this side, where it says, when he was writing to David Lucas on the 6th of September 1835, that he was very busy with rainbows and very happy doing them. So that's what I thought would be a really good starting point for our painting today. Not drawing, no pens, no pencils, but I'm going to, there you go, let's put that in your viewpoint. I'm going to crack out the paint today. If you've not got any paint, of course, and some of you are beginners to this whole thing, the online art stockists are open for business, delivering materials. A lot of them have some good deals on at the moment, so it's well worth shopping around. I would usually just Google whatever it is I want to buy and do a bit of online shopping to find out who's got the best deal going. I do favour Ken Bromley at Horwich, partly because it's a local business, but they're also just a really good company to deal with. I can recommend that you keep your eye out for what their current deals are. There we are, another quote from a poet. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So hopefully we'll just have some fun doing these. You could make some cards if you like. I made one of these for a friend the other day as a thank you card for going and getting my shopping. Don't know who I'll give this one to. I'm going to make a few of these, I think. They're quite fun to do, and then maybe think of other things I can do in a similar way. So I'll show you first of all what I am going to use. There we go. I've got a variety of different makes, 3 different makes of watercolour paint in tubes. I'm not bothered whether I use paint in tubes or in pans. I always used to use pans of colour. Now I tend to use either, and I actually squeeze the tubes out into pans, and then when it's open to the air it dries and you can re-wet it, so it's a bit like using the colour out of a pan, but you've got it in a tube to refill the pans from. So first of all I've got Cadmium Red Light, which is this vivid, slightly orangey red. Then I've got, one way around, there you go, Gamboge. This is Gamboge. These are all made by M. Graham. Quite expensive colours, but really, really well pigmented. the more you spend on your paint, the less of it you actually need to use, because there's better pigment load in the more expensive paint. This is Gamboge. Now, it's not a usual colour to have in like these pre-selected sets of colours that you often have, but it's very similar to cadmium yellow or cadmium yellow deep. So if you've got cadmium yellow, that will do just as well. Then I've got cadmium yellow pale in there. There's also, I think, some lemon yellow in there from a previous squeezing out. This is just some Cotman watercolour, Winsor & Newton. It's more economical than the M Graham, but it's still reasonably good quality paint. There's Cerulean Blue, cerulean, also sometimes called ceruleum with an M on the end, same thing. Cerulean. Ultramarine Blue next, that much darker and more purpley shade of blue. Now you could get away with those and perhaps have an alizarin crimson to mix your purple. Okay, but I have a dioxazine violet, which is a Ken Bromley colour. There you go, another plug for my favourite art shop. So I've squeezed some out into that pan. Righto. Just put the tubes on one side. And I'm going to make another card. So if you're going to make a card, first thing I would recommend you do is to find an envelope and make sure that you cut your piece of paper to fit the envelope. Okay, there's nothing worse than spending ages making a card and then realising that you've no envelope to fit it. And then you have to put it in a much bigger envelope, which just seems silly. Now, do you remember the old rhyme? Richard of York gave battle in vain. I learnt it at primary school back in the 1960s. It was obviously the initial letters of each of those words reminded you of the initial letter of each of the colours of the rainbow. So Richard of York gave battle in vain. There were 7 colours, but what I'm going to do is count in vain, which is indigo and violet, as one colour, as purple. So to plan out how my rainbow is going to be arranged on the card, I've got a piece of lined paper which fits within the borders of the card. Found out where the middle is. Okay, give it a little pleat there. And I'm going to count out from there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6 lines. I'm going to go Richard of York gave battle in vain, which is purple. Okay, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. I'm going to leave 2 spaces and I'm going to go in vain, battle gave York of Richard. Right. Okay, I understand what I'm doing, and I hope you will when I actually do it. Now I want to have space down there for some green, for some grass. I'm going to attach this. I'm going to get a little piece of masking tape, attach this to the paper, roughly in the middle. Right, this is just some masking tape that's not too sticky. It's been used for a few things before, so it's lost its stickiness. And it's just to stop the paper from floating around. But I don't want it to be too sticky, otherwise it'll take the surface off the paper when I peel it off. So that's fixed there. And that's going to enable me to make little arches of the colours, and roughly line them up. I don't want it to be too neat. I want it to be quite sort of relatively loosely painted. Otherwise I would probably take a pair of compasses and draw outlines in. If you want yours to be neat, by all means feel free to do that. But I want to keep mine slightly loose looking, not too tidy. what I'm going to do is, as I said, I'm going to make an arch there and then another arch here with all the different colours and allow them to run together slightly. But I feel awkward sort of reaching over the paper to start off the colours. I don't know why. So I'm actually going to do this upside down. You do it whichever way you want. So, and of course I'm going to need different quantities of paint. That's another thing to bear in mind, which I discovered when I was doing this one. Because obviously there's only a very small amount of purple, but there's a large amount of red. So you'll need a varying amount of colours in between. It's a good exercise to do this. It's not entirely frivolous and playful, although it's quite frivolous and playful. But it also involves an interesting technique. Oops, sorry, excuse my teacup clattering around there. A technique where you can just get colours to mix together without it all running all over the place. Let me show you. So the purple, let's get some purple out first. So I always remind people, if you're painting with watercolour, is to put your paint out into the water that you're going to paint with on your palette, rather than painting straight out of the pan or from the blob of paint from the tube. That, if you do that, you've got no control over the strength of the colour. Whereas if you put it out into your palette, you can see how strong the colour is going to be. Lovely purple, that. And always wise also to have a test piece of paper of the same sort that you're going to paint on, just so that you can see how strong the colour is. I want it to be a bit stronger than that. There's going to be nothing wishy-washy about this watercolour. Why not have a bit more? Okay, that'll do. Yeah, I just did it again. Strong enough, I think. So there's purple. Going to make a nice little archway there. Deliberately keeping it reasonably messy looking. Trying to embrace my inner child here, not worry too much about neatness. And the next colour I'm going to need, and that will hopefully stay wet for long enough, is going to be Ultramarine Blue, which is a purpley blue. Of course, if you were being sensible, you'd get all your colours mixed ready first, wouldn't you? Not like me. Just the strength. Wow, that's gorgeous. And now I'm going to put the blue as close as I dare to the purple. Okay, but not touching it yet. Right, I've left a little white line. Because it's about judging when the right moment is to just introduce them to each other. So I'm going to take the blue just up to the purple now and watch them join together, and yet the purple still has its identity. It's not quite been swamped by the blue. Got some blue water there now. Still clean enough. Not going to win any prizes with this one. And next colour I want to make is green. So I'm going to put some yellow in first. Now I'm not going to use the same blue. This is cheating a little bit. I'm going to use this cerulean blue, which is already a more greeny colour. See, when I put that into the yellow, it makes this Nice, clear, clean looking green. Whereas I know from past experience that if I used the Ultramarine Blue, it would make a much more sludgy sort of green. Right, it's got to go in now. It's got to go in before the blue dries at the edge. Didn't test the strength of that. My mistake. That's a little bit weak. Never mind, it's going to have to do. I'm taking it as close as I dare. Maybe dry the brush at this stage. Got a piece of paper towel to dry the brush on. Don't want to flood too much paint into there. And then introduce them to each other. Okay. There's a big blob there. Okay, so it just starts to blend in. There's a nice run happening there that, do you think I should take that out? Dry my brush. What to do? Might just suck a little bit of that up so it doesn't go too blobby. There. Under control, just about. Right, let's just get some nice clean yellow. As I say, although the water looks a little bit murky, it's clean enough. Stick the yellow in. Looks nice and strong. I'm just going to test it out on my piece of paper that you can't see. Oh yeah, settled in nicely. There we go, there's the yellow. Hopefully I can get this done in one take and not have to do any reshooting today. I'll try not to spend so long making this video as I did last week. It all got a bit complicated. Started to I'm trying to film from different angles and using my phone as well as the iPad, and then the editing was a nightmare. Oh my goodness, you live and learn, don't you? Keep it simple, sweetheart. There you go. The yellow to say hello to the green. Right, now what I'm going to do, because I've only got one clean space here, is I will get the red out to use, get plenty of it out, make my puddle of red, and then add the red to the yellow to make my orange. So plenty of, and here's the lovely red, yum yum, juicy red. Are you strong enough? No, that's a little bit weak. I do love these Graham colours. Very, very highly pigmented. Like lots of pigment load per squeeze of paint. Right, smashing. Now, I don't need very much of that strong red in the yellow. Watch this. I dried the brush, added it to the yellow in there, and that's really on the red side of orange, isn't it? I think when it's introduced to the yellow, it'll probably create a decent shade of orange. Quite like the wobbly look of this rainbow. I think Paul Clay would approve of my playful approach to painting today. Allowing paint to do what paint wants to do. Ready? Let's introduce those two. Okay. And of course, being watercolour, it'll carry on moving for a while, doing its own sweet thing. Clean the brush, give it a dry. Go into this red. Wow, this is making me feel so happy. this colour and the colours together. I think when I got up to the green it was looking quite drab, but as soon as I got to the yellow and beyond, I'm getting this amazing feeling of joy and enjoyment. Could go on painting rainbows all afternoon, I think, and I probably will. I've got a fancy to make some rainbow bunting. What about you? What are you going to make with your rainbows? I had a lovely week, the week we did Fluffy Toys. It was such a pleasure getting drawings from people of their teddies. There's some sweet faces there. Some really, really beautiful drawings, so thank you for that. Oh God, I don't know what's going on there. That's a mess. Never mind, it's a good mess. Let's bring these two together. Looks good. Quite nice, that. Whoa. That's going to go down into... You can see how the paper's buckling, can't you? That's going to go down into that hollow. Okay, where it wants to go. It's up to you how much you think you should control that. Might just go in there. You see, if I dry the brush off, I can just go in there and slurp some of that up, so it's not too disruptive. Maybe a little bit of that as well. Quite like those runs. I don't want them to spoil the shape of the rainbow too much. Right, so I'm going to let that dry and then add a little bit of green at the bottom and the sky at the top. You could add some words to yours too, a little bit of a poem or some thoughts of your own. Send it to a friend. Now, in that last part of the video, you saw me doing things that I always tell you not to do. And you might have noticed I've got the paint on the left side. I'm a right-handed person. I've got my water over there. So, of course, that meant that when I took water over to the paint, I splashed the paper. And it was really awkward having hold of my work and crossing over like this to try and get to the paint. So that's a really good illustration of why it is that you should really set up your paint on the same side as your water and on the same side as your dominant hand. So that's how it should have been, and that's how it's going to be for doing the next part, which is going to be the sky and the grass. So I'm going to come around the right way. I'm going to take off the masking tape, put it off nice and carefully so it doesn't scuff the surface of the paper. Turn it right way up. And interesting things you can see where, first of all, the purple, when it was wet, it was really, really dark. It looked almost black. And you can see how it's dried this much paler colour. You can see the clear purple there. And this area where everything dribbled down into the hollow caused by the buckling of the paper. I think that's really quite sweet the way that's gone. I like those accidentals, the backgrounds and so on. And here and here where the paint has sort of settled out into the lower parts of the paper, that red's gone really intense. It's still slightly wet there, but I shouldn't be going anywhere near there with the green. I'm just going to do a nice swathe of grassy green. Perhaps have a little more yellow in that mixture to make it a brighter, more grass type of colour. I should say the brush I'm using is a really ancient, old sable brush. It's, I would say, probably about a size 8. It's not one that creates a very nice point. I often favour a number 8 watercolour brush that makes a really nice point. But this one, I'm not trying to get into any fiddly shape, so it'll do quite well. So I'm just going to paint a little area of green, just as a representation of landscape below. It's not a literal painting in any way. It's much more like a child's response to the idea of a landscape. Quite happy with that. And finally, the sky. Now I've got the Ultramarine Blue there already, and what I'm going to do is to take some of the Cerulean Blue and add it to one side of my puddle of ultramarine there. The Cerulean Blue is that much more cool blue. It's more like a sky blue, but I just want to add a touch of the ultramarine to it, because what I'm intending to do is to sprinkle a little bit of salt, which I've got here ready. So a little pinch of salt is going to go onto the paint while it's still wet, and hopefully grow into some nice crystals. And I know that ultramarine is really good for doing crystallizing with the salt. So let's see what happens. Get that to run up to the top of that patch. So there's more paint at the top. Just dabbing a little bit extra in there. Just want to make sure there's plenty of wet blue colour. Sprinkle my salt on, and then, fingers crossed, I'll get an interesting texture. It doesn't take a lot of salt to do this technique. The tiniest little pinch, and at first nothing seems to happen, but you have to be patient. Don't be tempted to come back and add more salt, because what it's got to do is dissolve in the water that the paint is in, and then if it's got enough time it regrows into crystals on the surface of the paper and pushes the pigment out with it, creates some interesting textures. It's one of those things. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So we'll see. We just have to sit and watch paint dry. But what I'll do is to turn the video off and bring you back later. Well, you can see now that that paint's dry that nothing did happen, which is typical of watercolours, where they decide what they want to do. There's only so much you can do to encourage them to go where you want them to go, but in the end they always decide for themselves, and it's okay without the crystallisation. I can show you what it might have looked like had it worked well on this sample, which is a beautiful example of crystallisation working really well. Different colours I've used there, ultramarine blue and intense blue, and here burnt umber and quinacridone gold mixed together, and all of those colours have created these beautiful patterns. And also this is on a different sort of paper. I suspect the cheap old paper that I used for the card has been a factor in the crystallisation not working. Well, it's alright. I didn't mind it. It was quite pretty, and it was fun to do. So there you go. You have fun. Send me your rainbows and have a nice break.